ever feel like you're stuck on that treadmill at work? Busy but not really moving forward, like you're not growing or developing your skills as fast as you could be.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to that feeling.
Well, today's deep dive might have the solution. Personal development plans, PDPs.
Ah, PDPs. These can be powerful tools, yeah, for taking charge of your professional growth.
Exactly. We've got two sources to guide us. A recent research study from the European Journal of Training and Development, and a slightly older paper from the journal Vocations and Learning. And they both focus on how PDPs can unlock continuous learning and better performance, whether you're the one using a PDP or a manager trying to help your team grow.
Great sources. But
Yeah.
before we dive into the details, might be helpful to just define what we're even talking about here.
Hmm.
The Vocations and Learning paper describes a PDP as an assessment tool used to gather and document information about the competences the employee worked on and is planning to further develop.
Okay, so it's not just a snapshot of where you are now, but like a roadmap for where you want to go. I like that. And the newer research emphasizes that PDPs can be used for both formal and informal learning.
You're right. And that distinction, is important. Formal learning includes like structured training programs, online courses, certifications, things like that. Informal learning, on the other hand, happens organically through your day-to-day work.
Like picking up a new software skill from a colleague, or shadowing your manager during a client meeting, or even just reflecting on your own successes and failures.
Exactly. And the research actually suggests that the majority of learning in the workplace happens informally. So PDPs can be a great way to be more intentional about that informal learning.
Makes sense. You don't always need a formal training course to learn something new. But why are PDPs so important, especially now? The world of work is changing so rapidly, I feel like I can barely keep up.
I hear you. The European Journal study actually highlights this in their introduction. Technology is evolving at an unprecedented pace. New industries are popping up left and right, and jobs that were in high demand a few years ago might be completely obsolete tomorrow.
So it's not just about keeping up anymore, it's about getting ahead.
Right.
And making sure you're developing the skills you'll need to thrive in the future.
Absolutely. And that's where PDPs come in. They help you identify those future-proof skills, set goals, and create a plan to actually achieve those goals.
So it's about taking control of your own development rather than just passively waiting for opportunities to come your way.
Precisely. And here's where it gets really interesting. The European Journal study found that the type of supervisor you have can significantly impact your PDP's effectiveness, specifically when it comes to informal learning.
Really? Tell me more. I'm all ears.
So they found that supervisors who demonstrated autonomy support fostered significantly more informal learning in their employees.
Okay, autonomy support. I'm going to need you to break that down for me. Does that mean they're just like, go learn whatever you want, whenever you want?
It's not quite that laissez-faire, but it does involve giving employees a sense of ownership over their learning. Think of it this way. Have you ever had a manager who, instead of dictating exactly how you should do a task, asks you, what approach are you thinking of taking? What resources do you need to be successful?
Yes, actually. When I was first starting out, I had a manager who would always ask me about my thought process and encourage me to explore different solutions.
That's a great example of autonomy support. It's about providing choices, encouraging initiative, and supporting employees' goals rather than micromanaging them. Now, here's the surprising part. The study found that this autonomy supportive approach didn't necessarily lead to more formal learning.
Now, that is surprising. I would have thought it would apply across the board. Why do you think that is?
One possible explanation is that formal learning, like those mandatory compliance trainings we all love, are often structured and required by the organization. There's less room for individual initiative. But informal learning requires more self-motivation, which gets a boost when employees feel trusted and empowered.
I see what you mean. It's like I might not be thrilled about that mandatory cybersecurity training, but if my manager gives me the freedom to choose how I want to learn about a new project management method, I'm going to be much more engaged.
Exactly. And that brings us to a key concept highlighted in the study: self-directed learning.
Okay, I remember seeing that term SDL pop up a lot in the research, and it sounds pretty self-explanatory, but I have a feeling there's more to it than meets the eye.
You're right, there is. This study defines self-directed learning in two ways. Firstly, as a personality trait, meaning some people are naturally more inclined to take charge of their learning, and secondly, as a process, meaning it's something you can cultivate over time, regardless of your natural tendencies.
So even if I'm not the most self-motivated person in the world, I can still get better at directing my own learning.
Absolutely.
That's encouraging.
The researchers break the STL process down into 4 key components: initiative, control, self-efficacy, and motivation.
Okay, let's unpack those. Initiative seems pretty straightforward. You have to be the one to get the ball rolling.
Right. It's about taking that first step, identifying what you need to learn, and seeking out resources. Instead of waiting for someone to tell you what to do, you're proactively looking for ways to grow.
And control probably means having ownership over your learning path, right?
Yes. It's about making choices about what you learn and how you learn it. So instead of just accepting whatever generic training your company offers, you might choose to take a more specialized online course that aligns with your specific goals.
Makes sense. Self-efficacy, that's about believing in your ability to learn and succeed, right?
Spot on. If you don't believe you can learn something, you're less likely to put in the effort. Think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever avoided taking on a new challenge at work because you doubted your ability to succeed?
Oh, all the time. But I'm working on it. And finally, motivation. Well, I think we all know how important that is. If you're not interested in learning something, it's going to be a real uphill battle.
Absolutely. You've got to want to learn for any of this to work. But here's a surprising finding from the research. They discovered that only initiative was a strong predictor of both formal and informal learning, not motivation or self-efficacy, which you'd think would be pretty crucial.
Wow, that is fascinating. It really challenges some of our assumptions about learning. What are your thoughts on why that might be?
Well, it could be that even if you are motivated and confident in your ability to learn, you still need that initial spark, that initiative to kind of kickstart the process. Like that old saying, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Motivation and self-belief are important, but without that first step, you're not going anywhere.
It really makes you think about how we approach learning, right? Maybe we focus too much on feeling motivated or confident and not enough on simply taking that first step, however small it may seem.
Exactly. And this has some really important implications for how we design PDPs and how managers support their teams. We need to create environments that encourage and reward initiative, even small acts of taking ownership over one's learning.
Makes total sense. Now, the older paper we looked at delves into another interesting aspect of PDPs, their purpose.
Yes, it specifically examined how PDPs can be used for 2 distinct purposes: learning and development, which we've been discussing, and promotion and selection.
So using a PDP to demonstrate that you're ready for a promotion, that's interesting.
Right. And what's fascinating here is that the study found that both purposes were positively linked to more learning activities, A&E, better performance.
Wait, hold on. So it seems counterintuitive that focusing on promotion, ALESO, leads to learning. What do you make of this?
It does seem counterintuitive on the surface, but when you dig deeper, it starts to make sense. It could be that when employees view the PDP as a tool for promotion, it raises their awareness of their skill gaps.
So they're like, oh, I need to learn this if I want to move up.
Exactly. And that awareness then motivates them to learn and close those gaps, which ultimately leads to better performance. And this could also tie back to the importance of initiative that we talked about earlier. Seeing that path to promotion might be the spark that ignites their initiative to learn.
So it's not necessarily about the purpose itself, but how it triggers that initiative.
Precisely. But it's important to note that even though both purposes were linked to learning, the study found that employees who viewed PDPs primarily as tools for learning and development were more likely to engage in learning activities.
So while promotion focus can be a motivator, it seems like a development focus might be more sustainable in the long run.
That's a great takeaway. It really emphasizes the importance of framing PDPs as tools for growth, not just assessment or like a stepping stone to a promotion.
Okay, so we've talked about how supervisors can impact learning, the power of self-directed learning, and the different purposes of PDPs. But the older paper also brings in another layer, the organization itself.
Yes, it does. They studied 2 different organizations to see how their cultures and approaches to PDPs influence learning behaviors.
Let's dive into those examples. I'm curious to hear what they found.
The first organization was a Dutch governmental office, a pretty traditional workplace with a largely older workforce.
Sounds like the kind of place where things move a little slower, maybe not the most cutting-edge environment.
Exactly. And their approach to PDPs reflected that. The study notes that the PDP wasn't like super well integrated into the organization's overall strategy.
So it was more of a check-the-box exercise than a core part of how they developed their people.
It seems that way. Now, the second organization they studied was a medical technology company, much more focused on innovation and with a younger workforce.
Ah, so a completely different vibe. Did that impact how they used PDPs?
Absolutely. This company had a much more structured and strategic approach to PDPs,
Mm-hmm.
and they were clearly linked to career progression.
So in this company, if you wanted to move up the ladder, you knew that actively engaging with your PDP was essential.
Precisely. And what's interesting is that even though their employees primarily saw the PDP as a tool for promotion, they still had higher levels of learning activity than the governmental office.
That's pretty counterintuitive. You'd think that if people saw it as a stepping stone to a promotion, they'd be less focused on the actual learning.
Right. But I think this goes back to what we were discussing earlier about how even a promotion focus can be a powerful motivator for learning, especially when it's tied to a clear understanding of the skills needed to advance.
So it seems like the key takeaway here is that the organizational culture can really make or break the effectiveness of PDPs. If a company doesn't value learning and development, even the best designed PDP won't reach its full potential.
Absolutely. It's like planting a seed in barren soil. It's not going to thrive. To really make PDPs work, you need fertile ground. A culture that supports continuous learning where managers are actively involved in their team's development and where employees feel empowered to take ownership of their growth.
That's such a great analogy, and it leads perfectly into a question that I think a lot of our listeners are probably asking themselves right now. What if I'm stuck in an organization that doesn't have that kind of supportive learning culture? What can I do?
It's a great question and a very real challenge for a lot of people.
Let's explore that further. It's a perfect segue into part 2 of our deep dive.
It's easy to feel discouraged if your workplace doesn't exactly prioritize learning and development.
Totally. It's like, how am I supposed to embrace self-directed learning if my company culture feels more like stay in your lane and do your job?
I hear you. But even in those situations, there are things you can do. Remember that sense of initiative we were talking about earlier? That's where it becomes really crucial.
So even if my company isn't offering me a ton of formal training opportunities, I can still take the initiative to find my own learning experience.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that you have agency, even if it feels limited. Start by asking yourself, what are you curious about? What skills would make you even better at your job or open up new opportunities for you?
Okay, so let's say I'm a marketing assistant, but I'm fascinated by data analytics, and I see that's becoming more and more important in my field.
Perfect example. Even if your company isn't offering data analytics training, you can seek out online courses, join industry webinars, or even find free resources like blog posts and YouTube tutorials to start building that skill set.
So it's about being proactive and resourceful, even if the formal support isn't there.
Precisely. And don't underestimate the power of connecting with people. Find mentors in your field. Join online communities. Attend industry events. You'd be surprised how much you can learn just by talking to people who are passionate about what they do.
Networking, the informal learning superhighway. I love it. But what about the manager's role in all of this? If I'm the manager, how can I foster a more supportive learning culture, even within a company that might not prioritize it?
That's a great question. It starts with small, intentional actions. Even if you don't have a huge budget for training and development, you can still create a culture that values continuous learning.
Okay, give me some examples. I'm ready to take notes.
First and foremost, simply ask your team members what they're interested in learning. What are their goals? What skills would help them feel more challenged and engaged in their work?
Just that simple act of asking can make a big difference, can't it? It shows them that you care about their development.
Absolutely. And then think about how you can incorporate those learning goals into their daily work. Can you assign them projects that stretch their skills? Can you pair them with a colleague who has expertise in a certain area? Can you encourage them to attend a conference or webinar that aligns with their interests?
So it's about being creative and finding those little opportunities for growth that are already present within the existing workflow.
Exactly. And don't forget the power of recognition. Celebrate those small wins. Acknowledge when someone takes the initiative to learn a new skill or shares their knowledge with others. Even a simple thank you or a shout out in the team meeting can go a long way in fostering a culture where learning is valued.
It's about creating a positive feedback loop, right? Rewarding those who take the initiative to learn, which in turn encourages others to do the same.
Precisely. And over time, Those small actions can really add up and create a noticeable shift in a team's overall mindset.
Okay, this is all great advice for both individuals and D managers. But let's bring it back to those two research studies we were discussing earlier. We talked about how one study highlighted the importance of framing PDPs as tools for growth, not just assessment or promotion. And the other study looked at how organizational culture can influence learning behaviors.
Yes, exactly. And those two ideas are actually very closely connected.
Okay, help me connect the dots here.
Remember how the study found that employees who viewed PDPs primarily as tools for learning and development were more likely to engage in learning activities?
Yes, it seemed like a development focus was more motivating in the long run.
Right. Now think about the two organizations in the other study, the governmental office and the medical technology company.
The tech company, with its focus on innovation and a younger workforce, had a much more structured and strategic approach to PDPs, right?
Exactly. And even though their employees saw the PDP more as a tool for promotion, they still had higher levels of learning activity than the governmental office, where the PDP was more of a check-the-box exercise.
So it seems like even if the primary focus is on promotion, if the organization has a culture that values learning and development, PDPs are more likely to be effective.
I think that's a very astute observation. It's not just about the individual's mindset, it's about the organizational context. If the company culture supports and rewards continuous learning, then PDPs are more likely to be seen as valuable tools for growth, regardless of whether the primary focus is on development or promotion.
So it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, isn't it? The individual needs to take initiative, but the organization needs to create a supportive environment.
Absolutely. It's a two-way street.
Yeah.
And that brings us to a really thought-provoking question the research didn't directly address, but that I think is crucial for our listeners to consider.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
We've talked about how important initiative is for self-directed learning, that spark that gets the whole process going. But how can we cultivate a sense of initiative, both in ourselves, A&D, and others, even within organizations that may not have the most supportive culture for continuous learning?
That's a fantastic question. It's easy to feel stuck, especially if your workplace doesn't exactly scream growth mindset.
Exactly. But even in those situations, there are things you can do. For individuals, it starts with recognizing that you have agency, even if it feels limited. You can still seek out learning opportunities, even if they're outside of formal channels.
Like joining industry groups, taking online courses, or even just reading books and articles related to your field.
Precisely. And don't underestimate the power of connecting with others who are passionate about learning. Find mentors, join communities, and share your knowledge with others.
It's amazing how much you can learn just by talking to people who are excited about what they do. And on the manager side, even small changes can make a big difference.
Absolutely. Start by simply asking your team members what they're interested in learning and how you can support them. Encourage them to take ownership of their development and provide opportunities for them to share their knowledge with others.
And celebrate those small wins. Recognize and reward initiative, even if it's just someone taking the time to research a new topic or attend a webinar.
Those small acts of initiative can snowball into a culture of continuous learning, even within organizations that may have been resistant to change in the past.
This has been such an insightful conversation. I feel like I have a much better understanding of how PDPs can be used to unlock continuous learning, both for individuals and for organizations.
I agree. And I think the key takeaway here is that PDPs are not magic bullets. They require effort, intentionality, and support from both individuals and organizations.
But the rewards are well worth it. When PDPs are used effectively, they can open up a world of possibilities for growth, development, and ultimately a more fulfilling work life.
So true. It's about embracing that growth mindset, taking initiative, and continuously seeking out opportunities to learn and evolve.
Wonderful. Well, this has been a fantastic deep dive into the world of personal development plans. And for our listeners who are eager to keep the learning going, we'll be sharing some additional resources in the show notes, including links to those two research studies we discussed.
Excellent idea. There's so much more to explore on this topic, and those resources will be a great starting point.
Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep.